Okay, hi, I'm Rich Bronstein. I'm managing principal of Millennial Venturing, a San Rafael-based private investment firm. I'm here with Tony Quintong, CEO of Securieon Group. We're here in the backdrop of the San Francisco Bay at Pier 39. This is our inaugural investor and executive event, September 17th, 2015. And today we're going to talk about the cultural impact in acquisitions for mid-market companies. Tony, you want to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about the topic?
Great. Thanks, Rich. Thanks for having me on this interview. This is a terrific time to talk a little bit about cultural diversity, a little bit more about cultural impact on companies. In fact, it's appropriate to have Oracle, and we're on the boat of Oracle, how successful Larry Ellison been with this controversial culture that he's been able to create. And yet here we are on his boat talking about pre-post M&A type of events that occur based on cultural personalities within an organization. So I'm happy to be here. As some of you may know, Securieon Group is a management advisory firm. We work very closely with companies that are at a pivotal point of their growth. We're also looking at operations, taking a way to see if we can get the profitability up. But most importantly, we're here to protect the shareholder value, the founders and the executives, to help get their stake quite higher than what they originally started with. So I'm happy here to talk about some of the experiences we've had at the Securieon Group.
That's great. Thank you, Tony. So maybe just to kick it off, do you want to introduce the topic of cultural impact in acquisitions?
Well, yeah, I think it's an interesting point. I think that oftentimes we use traditional metrics to be able to determine what is the actual value of an organization. And you know this as well as anyone else, being a well-versed in structuring deals and for acquisitions yourself from your investment banking days, is that oftentimes the numbers do not actually equate to what is the performance of the team. And that performance of the team is typically tied to the actual corporate culture that's dictated or actually influenced from the CEO down.
That's great. So can you talk a little bit more, though, about the specific challenges that a mid-market may face when doing an acquisition when it comes to cultures? Maybe just a few specifics or like a top 3 list of things people should be thinking of when they're doing acquisitions.
Well, I think that oftentimes the original foundation of a company that started by the executives or the visionary or the entrepreneur, and they had a particular direction that they wanted to take the company, and that direction had to do with the passion they had within the organization, the passion they had for an idea, the process, the product, and equally important, the people. Oftentimes that vision has to be stated in such a way that that passion actually exudes from the CEO, from the founder, so the folks involved in building that organization, actually, some people would call it drink the Kool-Aid, but actually they feel the same passion. Because oftentimes, as folks will tell you, entrepreneurs, it's very difficult to actually build a company from scratch, actually get it to a sustainable level where you can actually pay for the employees, and then scale it to the point where you're actually adding value not only to the employees, but value to customers that want to buy that particular product or service. So culture actually starts from where the CEO comes from. And I think a lot of that has to do with family values. I think a lot of that has to do with their own personal characterization of what they think right and wrong is. And I think that, it can play a very crucial role in valuing a company, is what is the real culture that I'm actually investing in.
And so when a CEO or a company is looking at acquiring another company and they identify great business, great financial, credible business model, but the culture is just a really bad culture. And maybe it starts with the founder or the CEO, or maybe it's something that kind of, grew over time, but it's just a bad culture. What would you recommend to a CEO in that particular instance? Would you say, hey, this is something that I just wouldn't even consider because the culture is just such an ingrained thing and it's really difficult to change? Or is there something that you can do to mitigate that risk and still proceed with the deal?
Well, I think that's a great question. Oftentimes, we'll look at a particular company and all the financial models seem to work. It looks like it's a great strategic acquisition. It might even be a good marriage, so to speak. The challenge is this. Unless the company that you're acquiring has some moral issues, they're actually breaking some rules, breaking some laws, their moral compass is not aligned to your moral compass, I think you can still work within the organization. And here's why. I think that when you look at a strategic acquisition, not only are you looking at it for, is it going to be complementary to the growth of your own organization, but can you pivot, can you take the people that are part of that target acquisition and actually ingrain them and assimilate them into your own culture? I think the challenge, though, is what's called acqui-hire. We hear that all the time. We hear about companies being acquired just for their people. Here's the challenge there. If you cannot meld your culture and identify what your culture is and assimilate those folks on the acqui-hire to be part of your culture, what you've basically done is a temporary acquisition of what could possibly be mercenaries that you're eventually going to leave your company anyway. So in answering the original question, would you still recommend acquiring a company that doesn't have the same culture that you have? The answer would be probably.
Gotcha. Thank you. That was very good. So, tell us top three tips. Top three tips looking at a company. How can you get to the essence of culture via your due diligence? What are the top three things that companies can look at to be able to determine or be able to measure or just figure out what is the culture of a business when they're doing an acquisition in the context of that?
It's interesting. It reminds me of a great story. I had an opportunity to play golf in the Pebble Beach area. We had a second home there for many years, and we didn't belong to a particular country club, but there was a country club there, one of the more exclusive clubs, and we were playing with a colleague of ours, actually a client, and he said he had to leave that evening to go to a dinner at this particular country club. And the reason is he had to meet 3 other families that were personal friends of his to bring to that dinner. Now, the interesting thing about the country club is not only did they feel that this person could afford to be part of that club, was a good citizen, but they wanted 3 different families that were associated with this candidate member to determine if, in fact, the cultural fit of how that person operates with his friends, and were his friends indicative of his particular style and personality. So after he'd gone through a rigorous evaluation of his financials, background check, the last test was, I want to see 3 of your closest family friends come to dinner and let's chat openly. I think the same thing can apply to an actual company that you're looking at. If I'm acquiring a company, I'm working with you, Rich, in acquiring a company, one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to do all the due diligence that your firm is excellent at doing. We're going to look at adjacent markets, we're looking at target markets, we're going to see where strategically can this company fit and what tactically do we need to do to improve the performance and get the valuation up of this company so it's good for the employees, good for all the investment stakeholders, and certainly good for the founder. But one thing, number one, we're going to do, and I would encourage all companies to do that, is take the CEO and his family, the significant other, and go out to dinner with them, not once, but several times. And the reason being is you get to see a pattern in how they actually act in a social setting. That's a good indication of whether or not the moral compass is in line with what your moral compass might be. I think the second component is you really have to survey the customer. What do the customers and partners of that particular firm really think of the organization? Now, I want to preface that with this. If you were to ask someone about Oracle and ask about Oracle's culture, I think I would be surprised if anyone said, boy, this guy Larry Ellison is just a genuinely nice guy. But you can't argue with the numbers. So originally when I said to you, would you look at a company, when you asked me, would you look at a company if the culture was not necessarily aligned with yours? And the answer would be probably. Because if you look at the financial numbers, you look at the strategy that Oracle has put in place, they've been quite successful. Absolutely been successful. So I would say, number one, make sure you take them outside their comfort zone, meet with the family of the CEO that you're looking to acquire and align with. Number two, make sure you talk to the partners and the alliance customers that they're dealing with to find out what was the experience in dealing with this particular customer. And I think number three, I think you have to have a heart-to-heart with your own self and say, regardless of what the financials look like, regardless of the challenges of the culture that you're looking at for the target acquisition, does this feel right? And a lot of people say, well, what do you mean gut reaction? Gut reaction actually has a lot to do with people's decision-making process. And if you don't have a good gut reaction on it, and you just feel that this is not a good deal, probably walk from it in that particular case. I would probably walk from it. Because we don't trust our gut enough, and that really is what starts a lot of these companies. What does my gut say?
Yeah, that's an interesting observation. I think, as I kind of grew in my business career, we started getting invited more and more out to dinner with other investors, other CEOs, along with our wives. So definitely resonates with me, that comment. And on the gut feeling comment as well, that definitely resonates with me as well, because we have a fairly well-defined investment process when we look at opportunities. But I, took the distance for investment opportunities and companies that we really liked. But at the end of the day, when we did everything, we just didn't have a good feel for it. So we eventually just passed on it because something just didn't smell right. So that definitely resonates.
I'm going to make one comment on the fourth component of that is, if you do walk away from an opportunity, walk away. Because maybe the opportunity was a home run, maybe even a grand slam. But your gut reaction, your moral compass said it doesn't feel right. So oftentimes people regret what's happened. No, the decision was we're walking, live with the decision, and move on. What did you learn from it? Great, and move on.
Great. Well, let's bring it back full circle. What are the big three takeaways that people should keep in mind? One, assessing company culture, employee culture in an acquisition context.
You know, I would take a look at, first of all, as a company that looks for companies to be acquired or looks at pivotal companies that need some outside looking in view, I would have to look at my own gut reaction, my own moral compass, and say, is this a company that I could add value to? Now, we do that every day that we look at business plans, we look at financials, we look at target markets, but we're looking at them and saying, can we actually add value to that organization? I think the biggest takeaway is corporate culture is important, moral compass is important, but the other piece is, based on what you do really well, can you add value to that organization? Not only in the numbers, not only in the operations, not only in financial structure, but how about the people? Can you actually enhance their life? Because when you really take a look at companies, we're not looking at companies to grow them and selling. We're looking at companies to grow in order to give all the stakeholders some form of leverage. And if you look at it that way, that you're trying to protect all the stakeholders as best you can, I think you morally will make the right decision. I think your corporate culture, your own personal culture, benefits that of the target company. And quite frankly, it makes life fun, makes it profitable, and quite frankly, helps you get through the challenges.
That's great, Tony. So just to close it out, can you tell us a little bit more about the Securieon Group and how it can help companies assess some of these cultural issues that we've talked about?
You know, I've had an opportunity since 2002 actually, is when we first did our first turnaround of a company that we were full-fledged Securieon Inc. And it was myself and 3 other colleagues. And I think the one thing that we have learned is anytime that you go into a company that's been established by these wonderful entrepreneurs, it truly is their baby. There's a lot of emotions tied to that particular company. And the key is we have to look at something almost like a physician, where there isn't a lot of emotion involved. I mean, there's certainly a lot of empathy. And if we could provide some advice that allows that entrepreneur, that CEO, that mid to late stage company on some new ideas on how to sustain and scale their business, I think we've done a great job. I think the other piece that's important is not only do we create the strategies, but we actually drop the management team to do the execution. And execution is important. You know, there's a great Thomas Jefferson saying, vision without execution is a hallucination. And I truly believe that. I think any strategy that folks create, whether it's a proprietary process that they talk about or some experience they've gone through, the key is, can you execute it and can you deliver some milestones around that? The biggest joy that we can get as an advisory group is when we take an actual equity position in the company and we help that company reach a different milestone in growth and hopefully a successful exit for both the stakeholders and the original founders. So Securieon Group is a management advisory firm, and working with you, we look at the equity positions and hopefully we can successfully help that client get to an exit where the multiples are satisfactory to everybody.
That's great, Tony. Thank you. And we've, Tony and I work together very closely. I look at a lot of investment opportunities. That's what I do for a living. When we're looking at things that either operational fixes, need some growth strategy consulting, needs assistance with due diligence, or even post-close type consulting stuff, we talk to Tony, and he does an excellent job in helping us out and guiding us on some of those sticky and tough issues. So good. Well, thank you, Tony.
Rich, thank you.
I'm looking forward to an awesome day of sailing.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.